this is not a good scenario. This is not a good situation, but we can't just sit here and go like, we don't know what to do. We actually have to contribute and work with the spacecraft and try to get it to do what it was supposed to do. And both of us, without even really talking about it, knew that the best place for us would be docking to the International Space Station. So if you could lean forward in space, we were both leaning forward to get us to go that way and to be in that situation where we could dock, and then we could really take a break, everybody take a break, and try to analyze what was wrong with the spacecraft.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to How She Does It, where we meet brilliant women who have worked hard and reached the highest echelons of their field. And today, we're taking that description literally. I'm Karen Feinerman. I'm a longtime Wall Street investor, a mom of four, and a panelist on CNBC's Fast Money. Think you had a tough day at work? Well, NASA astronaut Sunita Williams made headlines when a planned 8-day stay on the International Space Station stretched into 286 days. She and astronaut Butch Wilmore were the first to pilot Boeing's Starliner into space in June of 2024. The ship experienced some serious issues while approaching the ISS. 5 of its thrusters, which are critical for maneuvering the ship, failed for a time. After some very tense moments, the ship finally docked successfully. But a few weeks later, following a safety assessment of the Starliner, NASA decided to return the ship unmanned. Sunita and Butch remained on the space station, 250 miles above the Earth, and waited for another way home. That did not happen until March of 2025. But if that's all you know about Sunita, then you only know a small fraction of her story. Among her many achievements, she's a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and the United States Naval Test Pilot School. She's a veteran of 3 space missions with a total of 608 days away from Earth, including 62 hours and 6 minutes spent walking in space. And yes, we'll ask her how she does it. Not how to pilot a spacecraft into orbit, but how she overcame obstacles, trusted her team, and pivoted when things didn't go as planned. She is really wonderful. Hope you enjoy our conversation. Sunny, thank you so much for being here. I know there's a lot of places in the solar system that you could be, so thank you so much for being here with us. We'll start with the very top. 286 days in space this last time, longer than expected. What is the best thing that came out of that?
Oh my gosh, there's so many good things, so many lessons learned, technically as well, I think physically, emotionally, and all that kind of stuff. What a chance to be up on the International Space Station. Feel very humbled and honored to actually take the place of 2 of my teammates who actually got off of the Dragon capsule, so Butch and I could come home on that capsule. And what a example of humility and teamwork. To me, I love being in space, and so is a joy. But I think the number one lesson learned, if you want my overall impression, wasn't until I came back. We're up there doing our job, so you just don't even think too much about it and just press ahead. But coming back, I heard about it, but I was overwhelmed with how many people were so nice and cared. People I didn't even know. And I run across on the street, run across in the airport, and they were like, "I'm so glad you're back." I'm like, "Of course we're back." I really never doubted that people here on Earth were working very hard to get us back home. So I had no doubts about that. But I was just a little overwhelmed with, the kindness of just general people all over the world, actually, who were watching as all of this went down. So I think when I tell people, and I hope I don't sound like a sort of a creep or anything, but I think in my heart, I really felt and found that people are nice, people are good, and people care about one another. It doesn't really matter what your background is. We all, honestly, as humans, care. And you can see that in so many other scenarios when something's a little tragic happens, is people care about one another.
Maybe it was overwhelming. The world cared. It was just a fascinating human story.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I think is really humbling and a little overwhelming when I came back, but really rekindles in your heart that people are good, when we need to remember that in this time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you are a trained test pilot. You like risky work. So the Starliner docking, how much danger were you in, and when did you have a sense something wasn't right?
when you look back at it, when you're in the moment, especially as a tester and an astronaut for whatever you're flying, that there's risks involved, right? So you are trained as best as you can to make sure you know as much as you can. When we started coming up on the docking profile underneath the space station, we started losing thrusters, and we had trained for, okay, we lose a thruster, try to get it back in the loop. We're talking to mission control the whole time. And then we started losing one after another. And then we're holding on the docking access on with manual control. Butch had taken over manual control to prevent us from aborting, because the ship doesn't like it when you lose thrusters. And so it doesn't want you to continue on what you're doing. So we took manual control to hold us and to give us just all a moment to take a breath and try to understand what was happening. We had lost one of the 6 degrees of freedom that drives the spacecraft, and we worked with mission control to get the thrusters back. So, really, as a technical person, you're like in the moment, just trying to troubleshoot the problem and work with what you have and work with the team on the ground and the technical parts of the spacecraft that are working. And so in my mind and Butch's, we both knew we didn't even have to talk about this. We're like, this is not a good scenario. This is not a good situation, but we can't just sit here and go we don't know what to do. We actually have to contribute and work with the spacecraft and try to get it to do what it was supposed to do. And both of us, without even really talking about it, knew that the best place for us would be docking to the International Space Station. So if you could lean forward in space, we were both leaning forward to get us to go that way and to be in that situation where we could dock, and then we could really take a break, everybody take a break, and try to analyze what was wrong with the spacecraft. Mm-hmm. We knew we weren't going to fix what we had. We needed to deal with what we had to make sure we could dock to the space station. So there was great coordination with the guys in mission control, and they were able to make those decisions because this went a little beyond our what we call flight rules of how we had decided we were going to fly the spacecraft before we flew it. So if we had lost a degree of freedom, for example, just to clarify that, our idea would be we would go away from the space station and abort and then potentially try to come home. But that wasn't a good option at this point in time. And so our flight control team, our flight director, Ed Van Cise, made the call and said, yes, we're going to try to go in for docking. We'll see if we can get thrusters back. We could see if we can get some control, see how the spacecraft maneuvers, and then we are going to go in for docking because they recognize the severity of the situation as well as us. So it's a team effort. It's not one person making the decision, and there's a lot of trust involved with the team. They have more data on the ground than we have displayed to just the two of us in the cockpit. So we trusted their advice and they listened to what we had to say. And then we came up with a joint decision to go in and dock. Mm-hmm. If we hadn't, it might have been a bad day. So I'm glad we made that decision.
So you have sort of a very nice understated way of describing it. But I'm wondering, this calm that you had, it sounds like Butch had as well, is that learned? Is that innate for you? Where did that come from?
I think it's learned for some degree. Like both of us are test pilots. We've been flying for a long period of time. Both of us are a little older in the office. So, we've had a little experience. We've both flown different space missions before on the shuttle and on the Soyuz, as well as our testing backgrounds. Both of us have tested aircraft with, new engines, new flying profiles, new rotor heads, for me. So different things that we have tested in the past. And none of this is really risk without knowing what you're getting into. I call it calculated mm-hmm. risk. You understand as much as you can about the problem, learn as much as you can. That's what takes all the time, is to really understand how these spacecraft work, so you know what you have to work with when some things start to degrade. So I think it's a little bit learned, but it's been, dare I say, 2 decades worth at least of preparing for that specific mission, in many aspects of life, not only, that specific spacecraft, but just in life, getting ready to be a test pilot on a spacecraft like mm-hmm. that.
So obviously you did dock and you got onto the space station. And I mean, there's a lot of leaders there. And now you have 2 people there for potentially and what turned out to be a pretty long time. How do you all make that work?
Well, we all have different roles and different responsibilities while we're up there. And so you stick to yours. Now, ours was at that first couple of weeks was just trying to understand what was wrong with our spacecraft and what direction we were going. And knowing then that, hey, there was going to be a little bit of time where people had to do some testing, we knew we had to integrate into the crew. So, you do what you can to help. We were extra people there, so we were eating more food. We were using the bathroom more than it was scheduled to. We understood that, so we wanted to be as much help as possible. Butch and I had been to the space station before. We had those skills, obviously. So we're like, whatever we can do to help out, give me something to put away, give me something to fix if it's broken. We were just happy to help out while we knew things on the ground were progressing along toward the decision to stay or not to stay.
So did you feel like you were the bottom of the totem pole where you had to just, all right, we're the newbies. We're getting hazed a little bit. We got to fix the toilets.
Yes and no. I mean, it's somebody else's house, right? So, both of us had lived up there and both of us had been commanders of the space station. And when you have visiting vehicles coming up, these other people, like, they make a mess and they go to bed and you clean it all up. You know how it is, right? Everybody has guests that come to their house and you just sort of roll your eyes after they've been there for a couple of days and just go, okay, go to bed and I'll make sure the dishes are done the way I like them and stuff. So we knew that we are guests and we are trying to be polite guests and trying not to take up too much space, trying not to make a mess and stuff like that, and just trying to help out. Now, as time wore on, they couldn't get rid of us. So we had to take on a couple more responsibilities. So, it's like, okay, now I'll help you take the kids to the school or whatever. I will contribute a little bit more than just the bottom of the totem pole tasks. And it was great. Friends, Tracy Caldwell Dyson, I've known her forever. We're in the same astronaut class. It was great to up there with her. And I was just like, what are you doing? What science experiment are you doing? Can I grab something for you? Can you teach me about it? Show me what you're doing. As it progressed and we knew that we would be staying longer, we had not got all the specific training for some of the science things. So it was nice to do a little OJT, on the job training, from some of our friends that were there, and they welcomed our help. So that was sort of nice.
So the public is fascinated by the being in space. What things like, okay, the food you mentioned, people always wonder, did they have enough food? How much food do they have there?
So we have food for another 4 months or so, an extra storage. I'm just throwing that number out there, but there's a good amount of food that's extra, just in case some of our resupply ships have some issues and things like that, to make sure that there's enough food for everyone. So we had food, and we ate well. So we were there maybe a little too well, because then we did have some issues with some supply ships, and so that later on made a little bit of an issue. But we were eating fine, no problem. I felt great. We were working out. That's another big thing that we do up there. Of course, we have to make sure our bone density and our muscle mass doesn't go away. So we had to, I think one of the harder things is schedule everybody on the weightlifting equipment. And there was a lot of us up there. So we had to take our specific times on the weightlifting equipment to make sure that we got everybody in during the day, including our Russian counterparts. And then you have to be careful about that too, because you don't want to break that, because that is a key piece of equipment for bone density, right? So there's a lot of that as well. So you just have to make sure that all the supplies, not only the food, but all the toilet supplies, all the exercise equipment is all taken care of pretty well. So we were conscientious of that. Both Butch and I love to work out, so we knew sort of about that going into it.
Okay, so I heard you ran the Boston Marathon while you were there. Is that accurate?
Right, I ran it on my first mission. So that was in 2007, Boston Marathon. I'm a little older. I was in a little bit better running shape back then. I actually had qualified for it, and I was a little sad that my qualification, it was hard to get into Boston. I was a little sad that my qualification was going to just go away. So I mentioned it to my sister. We sort of look alike. And I said, you can do it. And she said, well, maybe let's see if we could find the race director. Let's see if we can. And I was like, I'd love to run it in space. I'd love to try. I don't want to make any promises because marathons are horrible. But I did it. They set me up my number. They sent me up some highlights of the other races of previous races, so I could sort of see the course as I was running on a CD, which was back in the day, which was pretty awesome. So my crewmates were all on board and they were all cheering when I finished. But this time, the longest run I did was a 15K. A friend of mine ran the Gasparilla in Florida, and she said, do you want to join in? They'd love to have you. So I joined in for that.
That's fantastic. Okay, how do you sleep?
There is a good video out there that shows Butch in his sleeping bag. So that just got released. But we all have sleeping bags because
Are you
you don't
hanging
have a cover.
or you're horizontal? How do you do it?
You can be anyway. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Right? Think about it for a second. If you have no sense of up and down in your head, it doesn't matter if I'm upside down because it doesn't feel like I'm upside down. I feel like I'm upside
But
right.
do you want to be still and not floating around?
Well, you don't have to be, but for the sake of everybody else in the space station, yes. So we have sleep stations, like they're, the size of a table, I guess, essentially. And they have doors that close, so it keeps it nice and dark and quiet in there so you can get some good sleep. And they're like your little office. You put your computer in there. I had pictures of my family up in there while I was in there. And, you can read in there quietly and stuff like that. Close the door, turn the lights off. There's good ventilation, and you can go to sleep. And we use a sleeping bag also. In that little space. So you're not floating all over the space station.
Okay.
However, I will say, when we were up there, we were out of sleep stations, right? There's too many of us. And so Butch did camp out in the far end of one of the laboratories, and I was in a temporary sleep station in the European laboratory. So we sort of made our places just it's sort of like camping. And then had to sort of clean up when the workday started.
Okay, so how do you shower up there?
Oh, so we don't really take a shower, and I know this grosses out all the kids, of course, but we have bags of water. They're like silver bags. You connect it to our water fountain, and it makes a perforation into the bag. And you can put hot water or cold water in there. So we have some specific bags also that have like liquid soap in it. And then you put the water in there and you can squish it out with a straw onto a washcloth. And then you could just do like a towel bath. So that's no big deal. The harder part is washing the hair, because then you have to get the water into the hair, push it around a little bit without it going everywhere, put some soap in, mush it around a little bit, put some water in, put a towel on, put a water, it's a process. So I did that like only twice a week.
Okay. All right. So you're there. You've obviously made a giant pivot. In general, how do you make pivots? Things come up, but you're really good at that. How do you do that?
That's a good question. I feel like I've practiced this my whole life. And I mention this a lot to kids, when I'm going to schools and stuff too. Like, we all think that this is how it should be. But 9 times out of, maybe not 9 times, but 7 out of 10, I don't know, some random number, it's not going to work out the way you plan out. Something else is going to happen. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I didn't get into the colleges needed to get into that. So I ended up joining the Navy. I wanted to be a jet pilot. I ended up being a helicopter pilot. So I feel like my whole life has been sort of filled with these, I think, whatever unexpected or failures, maybe you might even call them, like, oh man, I didn't get what I wanted. But it seems like, and maybe it's a positive attitude, you take what you get and you make the best of it, right? And so, the summer was tough when we were listening to, meetings. We were talking about the testing of the spacecraft, whether we're going to stay, whether we're going to go. I think not knowing is the worst part, right? Once the decision was made, and I think I support it fully, it was the right decision to not take the risk, have the spacecraft come home by itself, and then bring up 2 seats, in the next spacecraft for Butch and I. Once that was made, I think things were clear. Like, okay, now we are going to be part of the next expedition. We are going to be part of Expedition 72. And I have a lot of experience, so it made sense. I was the commander of Expedition 72. And so you just pivot, okay, let's make the best of this. Let's try to figure out whose strong points are which. Let's make sure everybody gets things that they want to get, and let's make this a great expedition. And we had the full support, particularly of the 2 people who came off the mission. Stephanie Wilson set me up a bunch of files because she had been training with these guys, the Russians and the Americans. And I said, Stephanie, how are you going to run the show? Because I'm not going to alter the plan too much. You guys have trained like this. And so she sent me some really wonderful notes about, who was in charge for this activity, who was in charge of for this activity. And, and also some fun stuff about getting ready for Christmas and holidays and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's the teamwork. That's how you pivot, is when you know that you have a group of people around you who will support you and you have correct roles and responsibilities. I will say the hardest part was family, right? Because you have plans. My mom's older, and my niece and nephew were like, "Would you just come home?" Like that's the harder part. But honestly, they were all wonderful. Like when I finally made the phone call and said, I'm not going to come home for another 6 months by the end of the summer, they were like, "Well, have a great time, but just come home safely." So, and I was like, "Okay, all right, you're on board with me. We got this. We can do this."
Your husband, I would think that you had many discussions with him about, what are some of the things that could go wrong, and being stuck up there was maybe one of them as well. How did he take the news?
He is a helicopter pilot, is his background also. Was in the Navy. He's very technical, very knowledgeable about aircraft and spacecraft. In particular, as we were going through the whole process of training for the spacecraft, there was issues that would come up, and I would, share this with him because he deserves to know all the ins and outs, right? And then when we were up there, I shared with him as much as I knew also. I think it's fair to make sure that the people who I love and love me the most, know what the situation is. And so he had his opinions also, and he was actually pretty happy with the decision. Maybe he was happy to get rid of me. No, I'm just joking. But no, he was happy that the decision went the way it was, because just like, my mom and my sister, just come back safely. Right. And then, we have the rest of our lives to have fun together with. So just do the right thing, I think is his bottom line. And so he was fine with it. Now, he does remind me that he shoveled last year. And so I owe him some shoveling this year.
Yeah, I would think. Did he give you like a giant to-do list? Like, okay, you got to walk the two dogs, 286 days times whatever, 3 walks. That's like, 800 and change walks.
Yep,
okay.
Exactly.
All right, but you did get to do obviously some incredible things. Spacewalk. What is that like? What does that feel like?
Oh, spacewalks are incredible. I think of them as like every single emotion a human being can have, right? Because you're all prepared, you're pumped up, you have rehearsed what you're going to do, you're excited about it's just like this big task you're going to do, and you get in the suit, and you're in the suit for a couple hours before you even go outside. So of course you might be a little bit thirsty. We have water inside the suit, so we are able to, have like a Camelback inside so you can drink water. But that always leads to the second part. Of course, you're going to have to go pee at some point in time. And so it's a little uncomfortable, being in this big bulky suit. It's a little uncomfortable because you have to pee.
Do you wear a diaper?
Yes. Yeah. You finally get to go outside, and that's exhilarating because you're like, okay, you're amped up, and you're like, okay, now I'm in space and I'm in the suit. So you're excited. You don't want to mess up is another big thing that people always think about. Like, I just want to make sure I get this right. And then it's lots of victories. Like, okay, I feel great. And the suit feels good. I'm moving around. I have to get to my work site. You get to the work site fast. You're ahead of the schedule. And then for like my first spacewalk on this mission, I'm trying to move a foot restraint, and the darn thing's not coming off. I'm like, really, right out of the blocks. The first thing I have is a problem, and we actually ended up putting it off, and you just have to let it off, roll off your back and jump into the next thing. And it's at the same time, every 45 minutes, it gets hot or cold, depending if the sun is shining on you or the sun goes down and it's in dark. So you're hot, you're cold, you're changing your temperature on you. Again, then you have to go to the bathroom again, So it's it's everything. And by the time you get to the end, your hands are tired, you're hungry, you're happy that you got your tasks done. I was like so elated that I got to change out this reflector. My head was probably about 1 foot from our vehicle to bring us home. So I was like really nervous about, just looking at the spacecraft and not wanting to bump my head into it. Like, such relief when I finished that task and we had got that reflector changed. It's like, so it is like an up and down, hot, cold. It's like all over the place in the emotions of what you're going through. I mean, it's an amazing experience.
So you're doing all these technical things. You're a scientist, you're trained, but is there a moment you look around and you just feel like a spiritual awakening of being in this vast,
Oh yeah. My first spacewalk, I'll just tell you, just give you a visual. My first spacewalk, we were up on the top of the space station. We had a little extra time while the ground was trying to figure out what was going on with the solar array. Again, not everything works the way it's supposed to work, right? So they said, just hang out for a little bit while it was nighttime because they wanted daytime to take some pictures. And as we were literally hanging out there, we flew over Canada and the aurora was below us. It's the first time I saw the aurora below me. And I was just like taken aback, like, oh my gosh, like there's this energy in the universe that we can't do anything about. We can't even touch this, and that's below me right now. And that's hitting our planet. It was crazy. Another time I was on a spacewalk and I got the ability to go right in the very front of we call the pressurized mating adapter where the spacecraft come up and dock. And I was out there like on the Titanic practically. I'm like, oh my God, I'm on the very front of the space station. This is so crazy, and you can just see, you sit there for a second, you're working, but you look down and it's like, oh my God, there's the Earth below me. It's just incredible. It's awesome.
And so few people ever get to experience that. It must be extraordinary. So what made you decide to be an astronaut?
It wasn't my first choice when I was a kid. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I didn't really know anything about being an astronaut, to be honest with you. My father came from India. He was a doctor. My mom did anything and everything, jack of all trades. But one thing she really did, she loved animals. And my whole family loves animals. And I just sort of took to the fact that like, okay, this is a happy medium. I don't really have to work on people. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a veterinarian though. And, but I applied to schools that I thought I needed to go to get there, and I didn't get in. And on sort of a whim, my brother suggested that I apply to the Naval Academy. All of us were competitive swimmers when we were growing up, so we all like discipline, Somehow I decided, okay, why not? Let's go. Let's try this. And when I went there, I really liked it for the teamwork, the discipline, the organization, and I wanted to be a diver because I was a swimmer, right? Ended up not getting that billet because there was only one for women at the time.
When you say a diver, you're not talking about the high dive. You're talking about in the ocean, a diver.
No. Okay. Yeah. I wanted to be a deep sea diver. It just sort of went along. I was like very comfortable in the water. Only one billet for women at the time. It was a couple decades ago. But Top Gun came out and I was like, oh, this is cool. I want to fly jets. And I went to flight school and I ended up flying helicopters. Again, not everything works out the way you want it to, but helicopters were awesome. I love flying helicopters. I loved working on them. It's funny, like good friends around you recommend stuff. Why don't you go to test pilot school if you're so interested in how this helicopter works? So I went to test pilot school, got to fly pretty much everything in the Navy and the Marine Corps when it comes to helicopters and a couple jets. And that's the first time that I ever had an inkling of what astronauts do. And it's very similar to testers. We test new things. Every space shuttle mission was a test flight, really. Every time they went up, they did new types of things, getting us ready for the space station, getting us ready to learn more about spacewalks or whatever. It was all a test. So I'm like, oh, wow, there's a lot of similarities between these jobs. Maybe I can apply. I recognized I needed to buckle down and get a master's degree. I was a little afraid of school. The Naval Academy academics were hard for me. And so I was a little bit hesitant and shy about it, but I said, okay, just try it. So ended up getting my master's degree in engineering management and almost aerospace engineering. I have to finish my dissertation, but I didn't finish it yet. We'll put that for later. But anyway, and then I got in. So a couple times to apply and I got in.
Okay, so one of the questions I had for you was, what are you afraid of? If it's anything, and you just said you're afraid of school.
In high school, I did really well. When I went to college, I think it was a little bit of, initially I did really well. But when you start getting into those engineering classes, I didn't give it the time and energy that I thought that it probably needed, right? I was also a student athlete. I swam and I ran. I know that I was distracted and I wasn't paying as much attention to it. I don't think I wanted to, I guess, and I didn't want to do the work. So I guess I was afraid of academics because that left an impression on me like, oh gosh, you really have to buckle down. You really have to pay attention to this if you want to be successful in it. And it's hard. I think anything that's hard intimidates people, right? So it was hard for me. So I sort of had to train myself to get back into it.
So is there anything else you're afraid of, like spiders or something like that, which I know you're not. I know you do experiments with spiders, but anything else you're afraid of?
Well, I'm not silly. There are some spiders that are really bad, so I'm not going to go near those. All when I was growing up, I was sort of honestly afraid of the dark. And on my first mission, I was ended up being the only American up there for a little time. So I was the only one in the far end, the front end of the space station. And the first night that I was up there was some noises, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, not that I was afraid, but I was just like, do I not know enough? And I ended up making some phone calls to the mission control. I'm like, is that noise supposed to happen? Is that noise supposed to happen? They're like, yeah, you're fine. You're fine. It's okay. Pumps are running in the background. You're good. It's you have that heightened sense of, what's going on when it's quiet and dark. Mm-hmm. So it scared me a little bit, but then, yeah, I went to sleep. I knew what it was.
So I want to ask you about your work husband, Butch. This is a unique relationship you have. You are working literally side by side, and your fate is in his hands, or his and yours, or both. What is that relationship? How would you describe that relationship with him?
Yeah, super trusting, technically super trusting. We went through many years of training together beforehand, and, almost like I was mentioning, to the point that you don't even have to look at the person or even ask them. You know what they're thinking, what they're going to do next. And that was particularly amplified in the Starliner when we were flying it together. I remember being in the spacecraft on the launch pad, and he looks over at me, he goes, well, we're in this together. And I'm like, yes, we are. And, we both have different ways about doing things. Our personalities are a little bit different, but I think that's complementary at times, obviously, too. Mm-hmm. And that more manifested itself when we were up on the space station. We worked a lot together in the first couple months that we were there, too, because they gave Butch and I tasks together. One of them was making a Franken pump.
A what?
So we had we called the Franken pump because there was two pumps. One of them, the internal part failed. One of them, the external part failed. And so we put the working parts together to make a Franken pump. And that was something that they had never thought they could do in space. And I think it was just because of our relationship of how well we worked together, specifically on these technical things. We were able to get that thing done. It was over 200 nuts and bolts that could float away, and we didn't lose anything. And we got everything back together and were able to use that pump and extended the life of our bathroom system for another couple months. So I think our working relationship is really good. And I know his family. He knows my family. He's my brother. He's my space brother. When
you landed, how bad did you feel?
Oh, it's interesting. So strength-wise, we work out while we're up there. Our big muscles are fine. Our leg muscles, our bones, our density is fine. The biggest thing, though, that took a hiatus or a little vacation is your neurovestibular system. It reacts with gravity and your inner ear, interactions then with your brain to keep you balanced. That changed when you're up in space because there's no gravity, and then it changes again when you come back and there's gravity and your brain's going so all of us were a little nauseous when we first land, just because it's instant. You're back in gravity and your brain, it just takes a little while to kick in. So that's why you see when people come out of a spacecraft, they're sort of stiff and still for a little while because they're trying not to move their head around, because that's making this nauseous feeling. So that goes away in about 24 hours, 48 hours at maximum. You just have to sort of live through it until your brain reconnects and goes, oh yeah, I've lived on Earth before. I get it. Now I know how to move my head around and I'm not going to puke. And then it's all the little balance muscles, like when you're up there, you're not balancing, you're just on the treadmill, like strapped into it, or you have the bar on your back, but you're not using all the little muscles in your legs. You're not using the muscles in your neck. So all these little teeny muscles are getting reactivated, and your agility has to get back again. So our trainers work with us for about a month or so. And then finally, you're pretty normal. I feel like I'm normal.
You are anything but normal. It's a superlative, though. How do you feel about approaching retirement or working on the moon or Mars or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I'm excited, super excited for the space program. The space station is an amazing place. We proved out so many technologies, so many processes that we can carry over to the next space stations. May they be commercial, low Earth orbit, or on the moon. As we get ready to do more exploration, and get us back to the moon, get us going on to Mars, all of these technologies. I'm super excited for this next generation of explorers. This technology is right now making it happen better than and safer than we've ever done before. So I'm psyched about that. I hope I've made a couple positive steps forward to lay the groundwork for the next generation of these explorers taking my place to do great things. I'm going to be a little bit on the sidelines, but I'll be obviously cheering for all of them and doing whatever I can do to help promote the exploration and the science that we're doing. But I think I'm ready to take a little break from the nine to five, I guess you call it,
or 5 to 9, 365, or whatever it is. Okay.
Take a little break and just do things a little bit on my own time and spend some time with my mom, who's a little older, and do a little shoveling and take the dogs for a walk.
All right. Do you have any advice for young women who they see you're a role model?
Yeah, my biggest piece of advice is why not get out there and do it and try different things. Like I didn't know what I wanted to do, honestly, when I was 17. There's no way I knew even what was out there, what possibilities are out there. So if you think you want to try something, go try it. And if you don't like it, it's okay. Also try something else, and don't be afraid to fail, because that maybe indicates to you a couple things, like maybe I didn't try hard enough academically, in my case, potentially, or maybe this is just not for me and I could do something else. So get out there and do it. And don't be afraid of anybody telling you, oh, you're just a girl, you can't do that. That's your inner voice telling you can't do something. It's not really somebody else telling you that. So get out there and just do it.
Okay. So if you weren't an astronaut and you weren't a vet, what would be your third most likely career?
Oh, wow. Well, at one point in time, I wanted to be a professional triathlete.
Okay.
But I'm getting too old for that, I think.
We did have a professional triathlete on, the Ironman, Chelsea Sodaro.
Oh, wow.
Another amazing woman.
Incredible.
Okay, Sunny, it's time for our lightning round. We have some fun questions for you, a few of would you rather type questions. All I ask is that you answer the first thing that pops into your head. Don't think about it. Okay. All right.
Ready.
Would you rather grilled cheese or pizza?
Grilled cheese.
Okay, first meal back. Grilled cheese, right? Okay.
Yes.
Red Sox or Astros?
Come on, Red Sox.
But Astros, I think with,
I know, but I grew up in Boston. I can't.
Okay. Would you rather run a marathon in space or run a marathon on Earth?
Earth. Absolutely.
Okay. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Fluffernutter or Oreos?
Ooh, Fluffernutter. you guys have done some research.
Yes. Okay. Flying first class or flying the plane?
Oh, that's a toughie. Flying the plane, I think.
I'm surprised it was a toughie. I would have thought flying the plane any chance I get. Okay.
Have you flown first class? I've only flown once,
really?
And it was awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. And I don't like to fly. That's actually something I'm embarrassed to say I'm afraid of. Okay. Making dinner. Do you strictly follow a recipe or do you wing it?
Oh, I wing it.
Okay. You speak Russian. What is your favorite thing to say in Russian?
Pereputali.
Which means?
Mixed up.
Okay. Okay. Would you rather The Right Stuff or Top Gun?
Top Gun.
Okay. Would you rather Apollo 13 or The Martian?
The Martian.
Okay. Best song to be woken up by in space?
Oh, what is it? Let's get this party started.
Okay. Favorite item that you brought into space?
Oh, a stuffed dog. I had a picture of my dog that was on cloth, and they made a little stuffed pillow out of it, and that was super fun to have up there.
Okay. What's something you've changed your mind about in the last year?
Changed my mind. I mean, I think I knew, but like I was mentioning, my biggest impression about people, it really, all people are good. I think I really it has solidified in my mind. It's all in there. Sometimes we just don't see it in other people or see it in ourselves, but it's there.
I've heard you comment looking at the earth and thinking, why can't we all get along?
Absolutely. I mean, it's crazy that we don't. It's crazy that there's people who have such disagreements over such silly things that we would fight. I mean, I don't really understand it, to be honest with you. It's crazy.
Okay. Last one is in 2 parts.
Yep.
What is the best investment you've ever made and the worst investment? And it's a very broad definition of investments. Could be a class, could be some time, could be anything.
The best investment, I think taking time to talk to people, I think has been like the best investment that I've ever made. It's funny. I have a school named after me in my hometown, and I was so shocked by that. But they were like, "You come back. You're friendly. Whatever. And I'm like, that's I think the best investment is just taking the time to talk to people.
Mm-hmm. And the worst investment?
In the same vein is like I can waste time because I'd rather hang out, and I don't wear a watch, and I'd rather sit and talk to people and not worry about the time.
That's interesting.
Anyway,
I would think of astronauts as real watch wearers. Okay. All right. Well, I am so thankful, Sunny, we got to spend the time with you. What an extraordinary life and career and story. And just thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. And, I think if there's a story worth sharing, it's our obligation to share it because we can learn more from each other.
Absolutely. Thank you. We'll have another great conversation for you soon. Until then, onward.